We are still receiving and considering suggestions to cease hostilities there, that Ukrainian forces will withdraw and pull back from the territories they occupy. Only then will the fighting stop. If they don't leave, we will achieve this by military means. The tragic events in the Ukrainian direction began, I somehow stopped going there. Did you notice? No, I didn't notice. Yeah, well, there you go. So when the events in Ukraine started and they told us, well, we're not expecting you there, well, thank God for that. That means we just won't go there. And I think if I remember correctly, it was the Prime Minister who went there once, maybe someone else too. The first time I refused, and that's really true, I'm not making anything up, it happened right at the time when the government was being formed after the presidential election. I think it was in the 2000s. In 2019, but we never refuse contact. We are always open to cooperation. But firstly, no one is inviting us there. I haven't heard or received any official proposals. And secondly, we know how the majority of the members of this particular group, the so-called G7, as I once said. I don't really understand why it's called the G7. In terms of territory, population, and contribution to global GDP, they are becoming less and less significant. It seems to me they're a bit out of their minds when publicly, or maybe they're just crooks trying to get something out of it. They tell their own population, their own citizens, that Russia is preparing to attack Europe and that they urgently need to strengthen their defense capabilities. Maybe they're serving the interests of the defense industry, private companies, or maybe they're just trying to boost their domestic political ratings against the backdrop of a dire economic and social situation. It's hard to say what motivates them, but from our point of view, it's complete nonsense. It's a lie, a blatant one. But nevertheless, if this idea has taken hold in their public consciousness, if they've scared their own citizens, and those citizens want to hear that we have no intention, no plans, no aggressive intentions toward Europe, then fine, we're ready to put that down in writing however they want. However, the main problem for the enemy is that the gap between their losses and the number of servicemen they are able to send to the line of contact is continuing to grow and widen further. In October, I think there were over 47,000 losses. 47,500 people in total. They managed to forcibly mobilize approximately 16,500 individuals and about 14,500 respectively. Or 15. Were returned from hospitals. But if you calculate everything precisely, down to the decimal points, the net loss comes out to minus 15,000. In the previous month, the net loss was minus 10,000, so the gap keeps growing. And to this, you also have to add deserters. Desertion is very high.
Right now, Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov is not with you on this trip, although he hasn't been.
Do you miss him?
A little? Although he's not on vacation, he actually hasn't shown up at your international visits for 2 weeks now. The media are writing that he's supposedly fallen out of favor because of an unsuccessful conversation with Rubio. What do you say to that?
That's just nonsense. He hasn't fallen out of favor at all. Well, he has his own work schedule. He reported to me, told me what he would be working on and when. That's exactly what he's doing. He's preparing for a meeting with the American partners. And it is clear to everyone, everyone is saying it openly stating that this would be theft of someone else's property. In this regard, of course, I have a question. Who is teaching whom? Is it the corrupt Ukrainian elite who are embezzling the money of their own taxpayers and those of their Western sponsors? We are now well aware of the corruption scandal in Kyiv. Or are they learning this from the Europeans, or are the Europeans learning from the Ukrainian elite? In any case, both are acts of theft. That is exactly how we view it, and we are preparing countermeasures. I am at your disposal. First, I would like to say that we are grateful to the leadership of Kyrgyzstan for organizing this work and for the entire year during which Kyrgyzstan chaired the CSTO. They held various events, and without a doubt this contributed to strengthening the organization. In my view, in today's turbulent times, let's be frank, this is an important element of stability throughout our shared space. This is important for Russia, and the CSTO is of great significance for many countries as well. Everything went smoothly without any particular difficulties. We agreed on all the decisions proposed by the Secretariat. Everything has been signed, as you know. There were virtually no disputes on any issue. Everyone understands that under current conditions we need to work more closely with each other. We are not threatening anyone, but we must be prepared to repel any actions that would be aggressive towards our countries, as well as many other areas of work, which I suppose we will discuss further in a moment. The work has come together. Essentially, it is proceeding along these most important directions. And overall, first of all, we can state that there is a result. Secondly, I also see good prospects for the development of our cooperation within the framework of the Collective Security Treaty Organization. As you know, Russia. Now, heading the CSTO, we will be doing this for the course of a year. I outlined our chairmanship priorities during the expanded meeting. I believe you are aware of this. There is probably no need to repeat all of it. But overall, we highly value the results of this work. Joint, thank you. If you have any questions, please, I will try not to.
Yes. Hello, Interfax Agency. My question is precisely about the priorities during our chairmanship and also about the slogan, it's collective security in a multipolar world. Why did we choose this as our motto for the chairmanship? Could you elaborate a bit more on our specific priorities during this period? And secondly, my question also concerns collective security. Prime Minister Pashinyan has once again refused to attend the summit. At the same time, Armenia is conducting joint exercises with the United States. So the question is, doesn't this pose a threat to the unity within the CSTO's collective security framework? Thank you.
Well, as I repeat, the priorities were outlined during the expanded meeting. It was open. You were probably present there. In any case, many of you heard all of this. There are many priorities. One is improving our cooperation. Another is comparing the capabilities of the defense industrial sectors of our countries. Since Soviet times, it's been known that there was very deep cooperation. We offer preferential terms for the purchase of our weapons and equipment for CSTO countries. All of this works and works quite effectively. Yes, of course, everything is clear in the context of the special military operation. For some components, our capabilities are not as great right now, meaning they are significant, but we have to meet our own needs first. In certain areas, we are doing this completely, fully. I don't think that our production capacities are oversized, but still we not only meet our own needs, but even supply for export, to this day, by the way. This primarily concerns aviation equipment, both airplanes and helicopters. And now, of course, we have accomplished a great deal. Frankly, I believe it's fair to say this is a revolution for us in the field of unmanned technology and unmanned aerial vehicles, UAVs. We are ready to share all of this with our partners. Another area of joint work is improving the functioning of the CSTO's management bodies. This is rather bureaucratic work, but it is still important, considering that every country is interested in minimizing costs and increasing the efficiency of cooperation. We will, as before, as we have done before, or rather, we will continue to conduct relevant joint exercises in all areas. This concerns not only cooperation between the armed forces, but also work between special services. Unfortunately, the drug threat and organized crime have not gone anywhere. All of this will remain in our focus, and we intend to continue everything that has been accomplished. By our colleagues from Kyrgyzstan, as I have mentioned, there will be full continuity entirely. I am confident that this will benefit each of the CSTO member states. As for Armenia's position, it too is well known. It is, as our Armenian colleagues tell us, they say, we support all the decisions made within the CSTO We consider ourselves members of the CSTO, but at this stage, we are refraining from participating in the organization's meetings. Well, that's their choice. So if they think it's possible to work this way for now, well, that's fine, we agree. Since they are members of the organization, we remain in contact with them in Russia. And as the country that is currently leading the work within the CSTO, we will of course maintain constant contact with them as members of this organization. And of course, the decisions that we will be preparing for each of the priorities, we will also work through and coordinate with them. Please, what else? Vladimir.
Vladimir Vladimirovich, Leonid Kitrarin, Metsizvestia. A question about bilateral relations with Kyrgyzstan. We have quite a few projects, including in the energy sector. This year, Rosatom announced that it is ready to build a small-scale nuclear power plant here in the country. Was this discussed? Are there any specific figures, and what do you see as the most promising areas in bilateral relations overall? And here, just one small nuance. Not so long ago, there were problems with the movement of goods between Kazakhstan and Russia. Are there such problems here?
Yes. Well, I'll start with bilateral cooperation. I am grateful to the President of Kyrgyzstan for inviting me to visit Kyrgyzstan on such a high diplomatic level, and for the attention shown to our entire delegation. I would like to note what we said during our meeting with the media representatives after the visit concluded. Indeed, relations are developing very positively. Our investors are becoming more and more active in the Kyrgyzstan market. Why is this becoming possible? I've already mentioned this in passing, but it's very important. This is happening, among other reasons, because the current leadership of Kyrgyzstan has managed to ensure a stable domestic political situation. And this is always very important for potential investors, because everyone hopes that the obligations undertaken by the recipient country of these investments will ensure the reliable fulfillment of all agreements. This is one of the most fundamental issues. The Kyrgyz leadership is succeeding in this. We wish every success in this endeavor in strengthening the domestic political situation and, of course, to the country as a whole. As a member of the EAEU, a member of the CSTO, of course, we will assist and support in this. Our relations are developing in many areas besides investment, in various directions. This includes the extractive industry and the energy sector. Let me remind you that Kyrgyzstan receives all our resources at minimal prices and without the imposition of corresponding export customs duties. Of course, this makes our goods on the Kyrgyz market highly competitive, to put it mildly, and serves as a strong support for the Kyrgyz economy. But this includes oil and gas, but we are not limited to these. We also have plans, possibly, to build small-capacity nuclear power plants. Let me remind you once again, Russia is the only country in the world that implements such projects. Many say they are ready to do this, but so far only we are actually doing it. And if Kyrgyzstan makes such a decision, our colleagues are here together, we will implement these projects. Now, regarding the high-tech sector, it is also developing as part of our bilateral cooperation. I want to point out that the company Yandex is operating here, and it is becoming more and more active. I hope this will continue, considering that Yandex is not only involved in food delivery, transportation, and taxis. Yandex is also actively developing artificial intelligence. This is an extremely important and promising area for all of us. Yes, Kyrgyzstan is a small country, but there is an educated segment of society here. There are very good prospects and young people with a good education. This is important for us to create a unified space in this extremely promising field. And of course, we will continue to work here as well. But it is also very important for both us and Kyrgyzstan to do everything possible so that in the area of migration policy here, and in Russia, everything would be reliable and ensure the interests of the indigenous people of the Russian Federation, our citizens, and for our economy, but also to ensure that citizens of Kyrgyzstan who come here are prepared for this, including being prepared in a humanitarian sense, primarily in terms of their knowledge of the Russian language, starting from a young age, from school age and onwards. In this regard, as you also know, we are developing We are assisting the Kyrgyz leadership. We are developing the study of the Russian language, opening schools here, and working in the field of higher education as well. Overall, this is a very large area of joint work. In Kyrgyzstan, as you know, the Russian language has official status at the legislative level, and we value this greatly. And we will continue to work in all these areas. Yes, regarding the cargo, yes, indeed, there is such a problem. This issue arose. What caused it? Well, I won't hide it. On my instructions, the Customs Committee, and within the framework of the Eurasian Economic Union, our customs authorities have the right to take such actions, began organizing selective inspections on the roads. It turned out that a significant amount of goods, a significant number of trucks and freight vehicles were involved. They crossed the Russian-Kazakh border without any documents at all. Yes, we have a common customs space, a common market, free movement of capital and goods, but every such heavy truck, every such freight vehicle must have a certain set of documents agreed upon between us, between the states. There aren't that many of them, but they must be present. There must be a paper, a document stating what is inside this truck. And at the very least, it should be clear to which recipient this cargo is being sent. And from the very first document, it is clear what customs value, what customs duty must be paid by the person crossing our border with this cargo. And who is supposed to pay the VAT upon receiving this cargo? As soon as inspections on the roads began, it turned out that there were no documents at all. It's just black market imports, and pardon the expression, they're simply flooding into our customs territory. And the Russian Federation is missing out on, and I am not afraid to say this, billions, tens of billions of rubles for our budget. Of course, I informed my colleagues. We discussed this topic with the President of Kazakhstan, Kassym-Jomart Tokayev, and with others as well. He understood everything. He has no questions or issues. We agreed that we would do everything possible so that this large number of trucks that have accumulated at our border on the territory of Kazakhstan would start moving into the Russian Federation. Our customs authorities have agreed among themselves that the value of the goods being transported will be declared and the final recipient will be specified. And we will gradually, step by step, let these trucks through. There will be no queue. Let it be so. Yes, in fact, this will be almost like a green corridor at the minimum cost. Well, at least let them pay something to start with. And starting next year, during random inspections, our customs will require all the necessary documents to be present. If they are not provided, we will not send them back. I think the customs authorities will come to an agreement among themselves, perhaps even up to confiscation. You see, in those trucks, there's everything from nails to diamonds and even televisions. But let them at least declare shoelaces worth 5 kopecks, at least start paying something. Let them specify the final recipient so that we can collect VAT, even if it's a small amount. We just need to bring order to this. Thousands of trucks have already passed through there. I think by the end of the year there won't be any queues left there. Yes, please.
Good evening. Pavel Zarubin, Russia TV channel. The main global topic in recent days has been Trump's peace plan. And of course, we have a lot of questions for you. To what extent does the project that was initially published unofficially take our position into account? Have we received... When accordingly will Russian-American negotiations begin, which, as we hear, have not been and are not being conducted regarding this document? When will Steve Witkoff come to see you? And now, what do you think about the prospects for a peaceful settlement?
Regarding the draft agreement, there was no draft agreement. There was a set of important and carefully considered questions that, after much thought and deliberation, were proposed for thorough discussion and eventual final formulation. Overall, as I have mentioned and emphasized many times before, prior to my visit to the United States and even before the trip to Alaska, we had already discussed these matters in detail with the American negotiators. After those discussions and following the meetings and conversations that took place, that comprehensive list of questions and topics ultimately emerged, of possible agreements consisting of 28 points. And, as I have already publicly announced, it was passed to us through certain channels. We have reviewed it. After that, negotiations took place in Geneva between the American delegation and the Ukrainian delegation. And as I understand it, they decided among themselves that all these 28 points should be divided into 4 separate components. Overall, yes, and all of this was passed on to us. In general, we agree that this can serve as the basis for future agreements, but it would be impolite of me to talk about any final versions right now since they do not exist yet. Some things are of a fundamental nature, and overall we see that the American side simply is taking into account our position, which was discussed both before Anchorage and after Alaska. In some areas, we definitely need to sit down and seriously discuss certain specific issues. Everything needs to be put into diplomatic language, because it's one thing to generally say that Russia is not planning to attack Europe. That sounds ridiculous to us, doesn't it? We never intended to, but if they want to hear it from us, well, let's put it on record. No problem. It's just that there are people over there who don't want us to hear them. It seems to me they're a bit out of their minds when publicly, or maybe they're just crooks trying to get something out of it, they tell their own population, their own citizens that Russia is preparing to attack Europe and that we need to immediately strengthen our defense capabilities. Maybe they're serving the interests of the defense industry, of private companies, or maybe they're just riding this wave. They're somehow trying to boost their domestic political ratings, given the dire state of their economy and social sphere. It's hard to say what motivates them, but from our point of view, this is complete nonsense. It's an outright lie. Nevertheless, if this has been hyped up in the public consciousness, if they've scared their citizens, they want to hear that we have no intention and it's not in our plans. We have no aggressive plans whatsoever. As for Europe, by all means, we're ready to formalize this in any way they want. Maybe there's some sense in this, considering that if we all want to sit down together, talk and clarify certain points regarding pan-European security, probably, yes, we ourselves have proposed this in the past. If our Western so-called partners want this now, well, by all means, we're ready. But as we both understand, this requires sitting down and having a serious discussion. Every word matters there. Or, for example, in one of the documents, it is mentioned that we should resolve the issue of strategic stability together with our American partners. But for heaven's sake, are we against it? We were the ones who proposed this. We even suggested to the Obama administration to reach agreements on certain issues. We heard yes, yes, but then just a month before, as the Obama administration was leaving office, everything stalled, everything got stuck. Now another treaty is coming to an end for us, the New START treaty. It expires in February. Well, if they don't want to do anything, then fine. But from these documents, we saw that overall, there is a desire to return to these issues. Each of these issues is a separate area, and a very serious one at that. We are, of course, ready for this serious discussion, and next week, an American delegation is supposed to come to Moscow. Yes, please.
Olga Matvieva, Mayak radio station, Investi.fm. Continuing my colleague's question, could you please tell us who will be the main negotiators on the Russian side? And there were also reports about negotiations in Abu Dhabi. What's happening there? Is that a parallel process? And can you tell us who will be the chief negotiator on the Russian side? Who is talking to whom there, and what is actually happening? Thank you.
Who the negotiator is on the Russian side is obvious. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs, when we sit down at the negotiating table and begin to seriously and specifically discuss each of the proposed points for discussion. From the administration side, it's Vladimir Rostislavovich Medinsky from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. He is the presidential aide, and he has been handling this from the very beginning. For current affairs, in order to efficiently organize all this work, I have also involved my trusted aide in the process, Yuri Viktorovich Ushakov. He is in contact with our American colleagues, but he can't do all of this alone. This should be handled by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and partly by the presidential administration as well. There is a very large set of issues that need to be discussed, formalized, properly drafted, and all the details need to be clarified. So, in this way, I think, well, actually, there is no other way to do it. It has always been done like this. As for Abu Dhabi, yes, I heard some informational noise about this issue, but nothing unusual or secret happened there. Our special services, both Russian and Ukrainian, have always maintained contact. They have been in touch with each other even during the most difficult times, and they are still in contact now. What are they doing? They are dealing with a number of humanitarian issues. First and foremost, this is related to the exchange of prisoners of war. And the Abu Dhabi platform is actively used for this purpose. We are very grateful to the President of the United Arab Emirates for the opportunities he provides us. Thanks to his efforts, many hundreds of our people have returned home. Our guys, our heroes. So, at the initiative of the Ukrainian side, another such meeting was scheduled and took place in Abu Dhabi. On our side, one of the leaders of the Russian FSB was present at the meeting. At this meeting, a representative of the United States administration also attended this meeting as observers. This was somewhat unexpected for us, but we never refused contact. He made contact with the Russian representative and raised the significant question of whether it might not be worth waiting until next week to continue discussions, but instead to hold a meeting in Moscow already this week. Well, I only found out about this when the plane landed in Bishkek, but nevertheless, I said that we are ready, please, at any time. The issue is so important for everyone, including us, that at any time, day or night, we are ready to fly in. Tonight we'll return, and we could come straight on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, whenever they want. But we agreed that we would decide, and the US President's administration would also decide who should come and when. The latest information I received yesterday was that President Trump made a decision that still, as previously agreed, there was indeed such an agreement before. The meeting is being formally proposed by the American side to take place in the city of Moscow. Next week, that's fine, we are always open. So, who will represent the US from the American side? Well, of course, that should be determined by the President of the United States. Therefore, we are expecting them in the first half of next week. Yes, please.
Andrei Kolesnikov, Kommersant newspaper. Vladimir Vladimirovich, will you insist that the territorial issue, first and foremost regarding Donbas, must be resolved here and now and once and for all? Or would you agree to postpone it until better times? And if I may, one more question. Would you agree to return to the J7, to the global G8, as one of the options in the peace settlement plan suggests? That is, to all of these.
As for the G7 or G8, we never asked to join. We were invited at one time, and we worked there. It's a platform for coordinating certain positions. I have to say, you know, if you pay attention even before the beginning of the tragic events in the Ukrainian direction, I actually stopped going. Did you notice? Yes. So when the events in Ukraine began, they said, "We're not expecting you there." Well, thank God for that. I don't remember who went. I think the Prime Minister went once. The first time I refused, because honestly, and I'm not making this up, it happened to coincide with the formation of the government after the presidential election, I think in 2019. But we never refuse contact. We are always open to cooperation. But firstly, no one is inviting us there. I haven't heard or received any official invitations. Secondly, we know how the majority of the members of this group, in particular, the so-called G7, as I've said before, I don't really understand why it's called the Group of Seven, since in terms of territory, population, and contribution to global GDP, they are becoming less and less significant. But that doesn't matter. They are still important partners for us. In the current situation, I can hardly imagine how we will interact with them directly. Can you imagine it yourself? We show up, say hello, and then what? Just sit there frowning at each other? That's why I think that this should lead to some kind of normalization. Maybe if we implement all the proposals we received as part of that list, provided to us by the American administration, maybe they will serve as some kind of conditions for bilateral or multilateral contacts. But it's too early to talk about that. And the first question was, yes. You see, let me put it very briefly. Once I say it, I think it'll be immediately clear what I mean. So, up to this point, we still keep receiving proposals to cease hostilities here, there, and elsewhere. If Ukrainian troops withdraw from the territories they occupy, then the fighting will stop. If they don't withdraw, we will achieve this by military means. That's all there is to it. Yes, please.
Thank you. Edmond Jelbunov, NTV Television. Regarding the special military operation Vladimir Vladimirovich, is there still progress on the front lines? If so, in which directions is the most active advance happening right now? Thank you.
There is progress being maintained in all directions. Yes. You see, I'll tell you very briefly now, and I think it will immediately become clear what we're talking about. So, up to this day, we keep receiving proposals to cease hostilities here, there, and elsewhere. If Ukrainian troops withdraw from the territories they occupy, then the fighting will stop. If they don't leave, we will achieve this by military means, by force. That's all there is to it. Yes, please.
Thank you. Edmond Jelbunov, NTV Television Company. My question is about the progress of the special military operation. Vladimir Vladimirovich, is there still a positive dynamic on the front lines? If so, in which directions is the most active advance happening right now? Thank you.
There is a strong and positive momentum, moving steadily and consistently in all directions. Moreover, the pace of our troops' movement in all these directions is increasing. It is increasing noticeably. I really don't want to make any mistakes right now, right at this moment. Regarding the number of kilometers, it is important to note that month by month, the amount of territory our troops are successfully reclaiming in all major directions is steadily growing. In other words, the pace of troop movement is increasing. But the main problem for the enemy, and indeed the most pressing challenge they currently face, is that the gap between their mounting losses and the number of servicemen they are actually able to send to the front lines is steadily growing wider. This widening gap means that as time passes, the enemy is increasingly unable to replace the soldiers they have lost with new recruits, making it ever more difficult for them to maintain their fighting strength at the front. In October, I believe there were over 47,000 losses, 47,500. Through mobilization, through forced mobilization, they actually managed to recruit only about 16,500, and somewhere around 14,500. Or to be more precise, approximately 15,000 individuals were returned from various hospitals. However, if you take the time to count everything with complete precision down to the very last decimal point, the net loss still amounts to 15,000 people. In the previous month, the net loss was recorded as 10,000, so the gap between the 2 months is constantly increasing, showing a clear upward trend. And to this, you also have to add the number of deserters, because desertion rates are currently very high and continue to rise. This is evident not only from our own domestic media outlets and official reports from the Ministry of Defense, but also from a variety of Western media sources, which have independently confirmed these figures. It is practically impossible to contain or fully control this situation. So there's hardly anything that can be done about it at this point in time. That's why, overall, the trend is positive for us in all directions, and this is reflected in all available data and reports. Yes, please.
Igor Peskunov, RTTV channel. Thanks a lot. Vladimir Vladimirovich, have you heard or are you aware of the leaked telephone conversations of Yuri Ushakov, Steve Witkoff, and Kirill Dmitriev? What do you feel about it? In the West, this is currently a very escalating scandal, especially in many Western media outlets. And right now, Witkoff is under a real attack. What do you think about this? Thank you.
You know, regarding these leaks, they might be some kind of fakes, or maybe they really are wiretapped conversations. Actually, it's a criminal offense to eavesdrop, at least here with us. Eavesdropping is not allowed. Then some of them, maybe, as we like to joke here, they were supposed to be spying, but instead they're eavesdropping. They should mind their own business. But even spying requires some skill. Let me explain what I mean. I don't know the details. The essence of these wiretaps, the essence of these leaks, well, you understand, you see, right? We get up in the morning, from morning till night, and right after all the events are over, I came to you. In my opinion, the main problem there isn't really about us, it's about, well, it's about how the struggle between different viewpoints is unfolding within the collective West and in the United States itself, regarding what is actually happening and what needs to be done in order to stop the war, to end the hostilities. So we met with Mr. Witkoff before we arrived in Anchorage, and after that meeting I then visited the state of Alaska, where certain important negotiations were held and discussed in detail. It was during this time that we addressed several key points and topics relevant to our objectives. Overall, I want to emphasize, overall, at least that's the impression I got. We had a clear understanding of where we stood and what needed to be done in order to put an end to these hostilities. Then we parted ways, since both my colleague, President Trump, and I said that we needed to return to our capitals, reflect, consult with our teams, ministries, agencies, and allies. And after that, we agreed to continue further. Lavrov and Rubio met in New York City on the sidelines of the United Nations General Assembly. Overall, we simply discussed matters in general terms, but there was no conflict or confrontation between Russia and the United States regarding these issues. In other words, we remained on the Anchorage platform, maintaining our previous position without any escalation or significant change in our diplomatic approach. And suddenly, the United States announces sanctions against 2 of our oil companies. What was that about? Honestly, I have to say, I genuinely didn't even understand what was going on at all. It was honestly quite confusing, and I found myself unable to follow what was happening. So there's really no reason to accuse Mr. Witkoff of being overly courteous or excessively polite with his Russian colleagues. We talked, we met with him. We met, I repeat, in Alaska. And then, boom, just as new relations were beginning to form and everything seemed fine, sanctions were imposed that, of course, destroy our relationship. And in fact, I repeat, we don't understand what kind of signal this is supposed to be for us. That's the first point. Let me explain. Now, moving on to the second point. Mr. Witkoff apparently is coming to Moscow on behalf of President Trump to negotiate with us. But it would be rather strange if, in his conversations with Ushakov, he had insulted us with foul language and then said something extremely polite and then came here and tried to establish relations with us just to improve his negotiating position. That would be nonsense. And I'm not even mentioning that Mr. Witkoff apparently, he's an intelligent person. He needs to create some conditions for interpersonal communication. That's obvious. And finally, most importantly, after all, I've known Mr. Witkoff for several months, but his friendship with President Trump has lasted for many, many years, maybe even decades. He's an American citizen. He consistently and steadfastly defends the official position of his president and his country, showing unwavering loyalty and commitment. Yes, our dialogue, our ongoing conversation is not simple or straightforward, but we conduct it without quarrels, without heated arguments or spitting at each other, like truly civilized people who respect one another. But each of us, in our own way, defends our own position, our own perspective. And Mr. Witkoff, I repeat, defends the position of the United States of America and the interests of the United States as he personally sees and understands them, based on his own experience and beliefs. The people who delegate him to negotiate with Russia are not just President Trump. I think these are also people from the military, diplomatic, and administrative circles of the United States in the broadest sense of the word.
Vedomosti newspaper. Now in Europe, discussions about the confiscation of Russian assets have intensified again. I wanted to ask, what will Russia's response to this be? And do you agree with the words of Viktor Orban, the Prime Minister of Hungary, who said that confiscation could lead to legal disputes, numerous lawsuits, and the collapse of the euro?
Hungary is a member of the EU, and therefore the Prime Minister of one of the EU countries probably has a better understanding of how this could affect the European currency. It is clear that this will have negative consequences for the global financial system, because trust in the Eurozone will sharply decrease, will plummet. And against the backdrop of economic difficulties where the locomotive of the European economy, the German economy, has already been in recession for the third year in a row. This, of course, will be, in my opinion, a difficult test. The government of the Russian Federation, on my instructions, is developing a package of retaliatory measures in case this happens. And it is clear to everyone is saying it openly, that this would be theft of someone else's property. And in this regard, of course, I have to the question, who is really instructing whom? Is it the so-called corrupt Ukrainian elite who are embezzling the money of their own taxpayers and those of their Western sponsors? We are now well aware of the corruption scandal in Kyiv. Are they learning this from the Europeans, or are the Europeans learning from? As for the Ukrainian elite, in any case, we view both types of theft in the same way and are preparing countermeasures. What those measures will be, the government will announce later, if it comes to that.
Anton Venitsky, Channel 1. After Donald Trump allowed the testing of nuclear weapons by the United States, you gave instructions to the agencies and special services at the Security Council to work out the feasibility of Russia conducting its own nuclear weapons tests. Has any final decision been made? If so, what is it? If not, when might it be made? Thank you.
I instructed them to collect and gather additional information about the actions of the American side, carefully analyze it, and thoroughly present me with proposals on what we should do in this situation. But one of the proposals we received was precisely to work together on this issue. That's what it seems to us, based on what we see. And we are ready, together with the American administration, to consider all questions related to strategic
stability during negotiations, including those in Moscow. We are still...
If this comes up, yes. And in fact, even if it doesn't, we will certainly raise this issue because, of course, it's understandable both for us and for the US. That's clear. Preparation for real nuclear weapons tests takes time. And of course, we cannot find ourselves in a situation where the US conducts such tests, and we still need a year and a half to prepare for it. Naturally, we have to think about this. Not that we've said we would do it, but we must be ready for any turn of events. And I assure you, we will be ready. The proposal is already complete. Let's wrap up. Yes, yes, please.
Goodbye. And right now, on this trip, Minister Sergei Lavrov is actually not with you.
Do you miss him?
A little. Although he is not on vacation. He actually hasn't appeared at your international visits for 2 weeks now. The media writes that he has supposedly fallen out of favor because of an unsuccessful conversation with Rubio. What do you say to that?
Yes, that's just nonsense. He hasn't fallen out of favor at all. Well, he has his own work schedule. He reported to me, told me what he would be working on, and when he would be doing it. He's preparing for a meeting with the American partners. That's all.
Vladimir Vladimirovich, this is TASS News Agency. Allow me to return to the peace plan. It seems that the Western side, by proposing such quick, urgent meetings and insisting on them, is putting some pressure on Russia, on you in particular. Of course, everyone wants to achieve peace as soon as possible, but it seems that such matters do not tolerate haste. In your opinion, isn't there a risk that if the agreement is cobbled together hastily, stitched with white thread, there will be a temptation later on to somehow interpret it rather loosely? You just said that every word there requires discussion. How much time will this actually take?
I specifically drew your attention to this, to the fact that the issues, each of the issues listed in those sets of questions that have been given to us are very important, if not to say crucial. Each of them is a key topic. Do you understand? That's why this requires serious, thorough work. And probably some of our partners are eager to resolve these issues as quickly as possible. Well, why is that? My colleagues here have already asked me about what's happening along the line of contact. They've asked about the position of the American negotiators. So what's going on? Look, let me explain. Let's say, I'll get back to Kupiansk in a moment, okay? Well, let's start with the area of responsibility of our center group. Where are the main activities taking place there? In the Krasnoarmysk direction and around the city of Dimitrov. Krasnoarmysk and Dimitrov are completely surrounded, just like Kupiansk was at one time. 70% of Krasnoarmysk's territory is in the hands of the Russian armed forces. In the south of Dimitrovo, the enemy group has been cut off. It is being split up throughout the city, and our troops are moving on to systematically destroy it. And what happens next? If you look at the map, just look at the map, shift your gaze to the map, to the east, northeast, further on there. There is Komsomolsk, and to the north of Krasnoarmysk, there is the city of Komsomolsk, the city of Kupiansk, and the city of Slavyansk. A bit further north-northeast, there is Severesk. In Komsomolsk, fighting is taking place inside the city, and already a significant number of buildings have been liberated by our troops, and the advance continues. As for Severesk, which I mentioned earlier, and which is located to the northeast, our troops have now approached this city from the east, the south, as well as from the north. There is active fighting going on in the city. Out of, I think, 8,000 buildings, 1,700 are in our hands. And you understand, if we've approached from the north, from the south, from the east, well, what does that mean for how things are going? This is a very difficult question for the Ukrainian side, for the Ukrainian armed forces. So, if you look north at the city of Severesk, out of 8,000 buildings, 1,000 out of 8,000, I think, yes, as I said about Severesk, out of 8,000, 1,700. And if you look further north, our Sever group is operating there, yes, in Volkhansk. It is almost completely in our hands. That's in the Kharkov direction. Now look at what's happening in the Zaporizhia region. In the Zaporizhia region, they've built a fortified area that the enemy has been constructing for 10 years, since 2014. They started taking care of it back then and later reinforced it. A stronghold, a fortified district, which our Dnieper group is facing. It's a serious stronghold. Our Dnieper group is operating there, and in some sectors, thanks to the heroism of our guys, they're breaking through the defenses at key points. But that's not even the main thing. The main thing is that our other group, Vostok, has broken through the enemy's defenses and is advancing rapidly in the north of the Zaporizhzhia region, on the border between Zaporizhzhia and Dnipropetrovsk regions. And I repeat, they're advancing at a very rapid pace. The town there, Gulyai-Pol, is an important logistical point. They've come within 1.5 to 2 kilometers of Gulyai-Pol. Will they take it in the coming days or not? I don't know, but they will definitely keep advancing. What does this mean? It means that the forces of the Vostok group are practically bypassing the entire Ukuriap area from the north. On one side, our Dnipro group is positioned against them, while the Vostok group is flanking them from the north. And this could potentially lead to a complete and significant collapse of the front lines in this particular area, which is a matter of great concern. And here, in this very situation, lies the fundamental difference between those individuals and policymakers in the West who are seeking to achieve a lasting and sustainable peace, and who wish to do so as quickly and efficiently as possible, even if it means accepting the cost of making some mutual concessions, including, but not limited to, concessions on the Ukrainian side. Because if everything that happened in Kupiansk happens in the areas I just mentioned, then the collapse of the front will be inevitable. Some people want to believe that the same Kupiansk on November 4th, let me remind you, the head of the Kyiv regime announced that he would be in the hands of the Ukrainian armed forces in 5 to 7 days, as is now known. The enemy group there has been completely eliminated. The city is entirely in our hands. And on the left bank of the Oskal River, another 15 battalions have been blocked. That's 3,500 people. And some of our commanders say that certain servicemen of the AFU in this area already look like homeless people. This is not a joke. Well, just imagine, there are 3,500 people there. How can you supply them all with food using drones? So the wear and tear, the lack of ammunition, well, it's impossible. They've been in this condition for, I don't know, not just 1 week now, and now they've practically closed the encirclement. So those in the West who understand what this could lead to are insisting on ending the hostilities as soon as possible, even if it requires some concessions from the Kyiv regime. Because they understand that if the front starts collapsing in certain areas, then the armed forces in Ukraine will completely lose their combat capability. They will lose their most capable units. This is exactly what's happening now in the Krasnoarmysk area. And they're saying, that's enough, preserve the core of your armed forces and your statehood. That's what needs to be considered, say, the representatives of this point of view. And others who believe that Kupiansk has already returned under the control of the Ukrainian armed forces insist on continuing the fighting to the last Ukrainian. That's the difference in approaches. And those who are attacking Mr. Witkov are representatives of the other point of view, who, together with the Ukrainian establishment, want to steal money and continue the fighting to the last Ukrainian. I've already said this publicly. Basically, we are ready for this. Go ahead.
Hello, Vladimir Vladimirovich. Yekaterina Lazareva, Uraru Agency. I have a suggestion. Uraru Agency, Yekaterina Lazareva. I have a suggestion, a question about the Collegium. If we return again to the peace plans, there is Trump's peace plan and there is an alternative plan from Europe. But is there an understanding of whom to talk to, negotiate with, and sign the final documents with from the political leadership of Ukraine or perhaps already the military leadership?
You know, signing documents with the Ukrainian leadership is pointless. I've spoken about this topic many times already. I believe that the Ukrainian leadership made a fundamental strategic mistake when it was afraid to go to presidential elections, after which the president lost his legitimate status. Russia is also in a state of armed conflict with Ukraine. But we held elections, and we held presidential elections. And we recently held elections for municipal and regional authorities as well. We do all of this, but for some reason they don't. After all, as soon as any kind of peace agreements are signed, the fighting will stop. It is necessary to immediately lift the imposed martial law. And if martial law is lifted, elections should be announced right away. But under today's circumstances, it's hard for the current political leadership of Ukraine to count on a victory without rigging the results. Well, I think it's almost impossible. Although, of course, as Stalin said, it doesn't matter who votes, what matters is who counts the votes. And no one has done away with administrative resources either. But still, it's a difficult situation for them. But then after that, a referendum needs to be held on all territorial issues. That's what is written in the Constitution. And then the referendum must be confirmed by the Constitutional Court. And what is happening with the Constitutional Court? I've already talked about this too. Let me remind you, when the political leadership demanded that the Constitutional Court confirm the president's powers, the Constitutional Court did not agree. You see, it avoided giving an answer, because the Constitution allows only one term, 5 years, that's it, goodbye. Extension is not provided for. We could go into all these details now, all sorts of legal technicalities, but extension is not provided for, even under the conditions of martial law being declared. Only the Rada has the right to extend its powers during wartime. The president does not, so he himself. As an official, he cannot write it. But then confirmation from the Constitutional Court is required. But when the Constitutional Court was asked to confirm his powers and the court refused, do you know what they did? I don't remember if I mentioned this or not, but it's funny. The security service stopped letting him into his workplace. He came to work, knocked on the door, and they told him he was out. And in the end, he fled abroad. The Constitutional Court is not functioning. The chairman of the Supreme Court is in prison for corruption. Those who are involved in corruption, the biggest corrupt officials, put the chairman of the Supreme Court in prison for corruption. So during this time, the terms of the Constitutional Court members have expired. New members of the Constitutional Court need to be elected. It's an entire procedure. You understand? So that's how it is. As soon as martial law is lifted, a presidential election must be held, a referendum must be conducted, and a new constitutional court must be formed. This is something that, once started, will never end. Therefore, in general, of course, we want to eventually reach an agreement with Ukraine, but right now it's simply almost impossible. Impossible legally. Anyone from their side who can or wants to, let them negotiate. What we need is for our decisions to be internationally recognized by the main global players. That's all there is to it. And that matters. Because it's one thing when decisions are recognized, and for example, certain territories are under Russian sovereignty, and if the agreement is violated, it would be considered an attack on the Russian Federation with all the corresponding retaliatory measures from Russia. Or it will be perceived as an attempt to reclaim territory that legally belongs to Ukraine, territory that legally belongs to Ukraine. These are two different things, so of course we need recognition, but not from Ukraine today. I hope that in the future we will be able to come to an agreement with Ukraine. There are quite a few reasonable people there who want to build long-term, historically grounded relations with Russia. So, well, we need to, it's being suggested that we wrap up. Let's finish. Let's conclude.
Hello, my name is Kirill Atukin, Rossiyskaya Gazeta. Yes.
Please.
Could you please tell us, Hungarian media have reported that Viktor Orban, the Hungarian Prime Minister, will be flying to Moscow tomorrow for talks with you? Could you confirm that such a meeting will take place, and what is the purpose of his visit? Thank you.
We have contacts with the Hungarian side regarding a possible meeting. And we are always happy to welcome any of our partners in Russia, including, despite their aggressive behavior, our European colleagues, especially Viktor Orban. We know his position. It is quite objective, in my opinion. He is one of those people who see the realities on the ground and, based on those realities, formulate their political position. We also have a bilateral issue, because there is very extensive cooperation in the energy sector, not to mention the Pax nuclear power plant. And there are issues there that require further discussion. This concerns these very fuel rods for the power plant, because in Ukraine, for example, they used American fuel and we're not against it, but the fuel rods started to bend, the pipes began to warp, which led to an emergency situation. So here, everything needs to be carefully calculated. It's a serious issue, and there are many other bilateral issues as well. We are always glad to welcome Mr. Sorban if he is able to accept our invitation. Postscript note, I just wanted to say thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, considering, well...
Will it help us at all, I wonder?
Yes.
Aren't you ashamed?
If I may, let's bring in Valentin Alfimov from Komsomolskaya Pravda. You have already partially answered this question. It's a legal question. Then why do it? About Crimea and Donbass. If there won't be... In Trump's plan, it says that de facto they supposedly recognize it as ours, but not de jure. What does that mean? I'm asking you as lawyers, how can it be de facto but not de jure?
This should be the subject of our negotiations with the American side. Thank you very much for bringing this to our attention. You're right, this is one of the key points.
Thank you very much.